Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President,
comment about Cohen's sentencing?
Mr. President, in reaction to Michael Cohen's sentencing,
Did Michael Cohen
Mr.
cover
President.
dirty deeds?
President Trump's silent reaction to the sentencing of his former attorney, Michael Cohen. But according to CNN, behind closed doors, sources within the administration say the president uttered 3 words about his former fixer. There was 3 words, quote, "He's a liar." Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jenna Flanagan. Michael Cohen now faces 3 years in federal prison for crimes including paying hush money during the 2016 election to 2 women who alleged to have had affairs with the president. Cohen testified these payments were coordinated by the president himself. During his sentencing, Cohen explained to the judge that he, quote, acted out of blind loyalty, adding that he felt it was his duty to cover up the president's dirty deeds, and that the president led him to ignore his inner voice and moral compass. On Wednesday, the president's close friend, David Pecker, the head of America Media, who publishes the National Enquirer, among other tabloids, also admitted to paying off Playboy model in 2016 to protect the president's image. Pecker has agreed to cooperate with authorities investigating the president. All of this is playing out as the search continues for the president's 3rd chief of staff and as his former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, faces mounting fallout for lying to the FBI and the special counsel's office. Thursday morning brought a series of tweets from the president, which included, quote, "I never directed Michael Cohen to break the law. He was a lawyer and he is supposed to know the law. It is called advice of counsel." He went on to say that, quote, "Those charges were just agreed to by him in order to embarrass the president and get as much of a reduced prison sentence, which he did, including the fact that his family was temporarily let off the hook. As a lawyer, Michael has great liability to me," end quote. On Thursday morning, however, NBC News reported that the president is now, quote, concerned about impeachment. Should he be? When asked, New York Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler, a ranking member of the Judicial Committee, responded,
"Even though they were committed before the president became president, they were committed in the service of fraudulently obtaining the office. That would be that would be an impeachable offense."
So are the grounds for a presidential impeachment being laid? For the answer to that and so many other questions surrounding President Trump and his presidency, we are pleased to welcome former Watergate prosecutor Jill Wine-Banks. Jill, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on.
So first, I do want to get your reaction to the sentencing of Michael Cohen.
I think the number of years that he got is a pretty fair one. I think what was really dramatic and important, and no one should forget about, is that the judge agreed with the prosecutors who agreed with Michael Cohen that the president played a pivotal role in his crime. That means that for whatever Michael Cohen is guilty of, so too is the president. He said that he did this act at the direction of the president and in coordination with the president, who at that time was the candidate for president. And that makes him just as guilty as Michael Cohen. So we need to be looking at either indictment or impeachment, or at the very least at the Judiciary Committee holding hearings so that the American public can hear all the facts and learn what has gone on.
Well, and that actually leads to something that you had actually said earlier this summer. I believe you were on Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, and you were saying that a guilty plea from Cohen automatically should equal impeachment of the president. You're saying that that's still the case?
What I said then, of course, was based on just Michael Cohen's allocution when he admitted his guilt in court. That's just his word. The prosecutor now believes what Michael Cohen said and has indicated that they have corroborating evidence, which is why they, in their sentencing report, have said that he worked with the president. The judge in sentencing Cohen yesterday also acknowledged the truth of that. But in addition, we now have David Pecker from AMI, the group that publishes many magazines and is the one that did the catch and kill purchase of Karen McDougal's story, another woman that Donald Trump had a relationship with and paid off to remain silent. He also said, as did Michael Cohen, that the payments were illegal campaign contributions. They were done specifically for the purpose of having the campaign be successful. That's what that was all about. And so Donald Trump now loses his defense of, well, I only did it to protect my family. He didn't. He did it to win the election, and it was illegal.
Given the fact that you mentioned that a guilty plea, not even the sentencing, but the guilty plea from Cohen would automatically equal an impeachment, we recently saw the president have a sit down with legislative leaders from the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Quite a contentious interaction between all three of them. But I'm wondering, because a lot of that was the president talking about how he has votes in the Senate, but not necessarily in the House, or that he does have the votes in the House for certain things that he might want, and Nancy Pelosi pushing back and saying, no, you don't. I'm wondering, does this affect, or does this foreshadow what we might see for an impeachment vote, should that come up in the upcoming session?
Yes. Now, let me just make a small correction, which is, I'm not saying it's an automatic impeachment. I'm saying we need all the facts. So hearings are quite appropriate. We have more than ample evidence to warrant a full investigation. The problem has been that the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate and refused to subpoena relevant witnesses, and they just really were suppressing the facts. Now that the Democrats have the power to subpoena, they should use that. They should allow this to become public for us to all be educated. Then a decision can be made as to whether an impeachment should proceed. Impeachment is a political act. Indictment is a criminal one. I have always believed from the days of Watergate that the president is not above the law, that there is nothing in the Constitution that says he cannot be indicted. It does provide for impeachment, which is a political solution to corruption in the White House, but it doesn't say that's the only method. It may be the best politically. That's what Leon Jaworski felt during Watergate. We had enough evidence to indict Richard Nixon. We wanted to indict Richard Nixon, but Leon Jaworski said, who was the special prosecutor then, after replacing Archie Cox, who Nixon had fired in one of the acts of obstruction of justice that we would have charged. And so he felt that we should try to have an impeachment. Now, during that time, we had a House and a Senate that was serious about impeachment. Impeachment hearings were underway already. We turned over our evidence in a roadmap to impeachment because we believed that someone would take it seriously, that the House would have hearings, that the House would do the right thing.
Is there any concern that the Senate might not take it seriously?
Yes, there is, by me and by many. So that's the difference. That's why we may not be able to have a conviction. We could have articles of impeachment. The hearings might turn enough Republicans in the Senate. That's what happened again during Watergate. There was huge support. Remember, Richard Nixon won 49 out of 50 states. He won the popular vote. It was a landslide.
Which is not terribly different, or it is different from the way that this president won. He did win, of course, as we all know, the Electoral College, but not the popular vote. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for talking with us and definitely for giving us some much needed perspective on the issue of impeachment, because that will be a very big issue going into the next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.